Hello and welcome to Get Yourself Optimized. I'm your host, Stephan Spencer, and today it's my pleasure to have Fred Diamond with us. Fred is the host and producer of the award-winning Sales Game Changers podcast. He's also the co-founder of the Institute for Excellence in Sales. He's also an advocate for Lyme disease treatment and is a frequent article contributor to LymeDisease.org. His books, Love, Hope, Lyme, What Family Members, Partners, and Friends Who Love a Chronic Lyme Survivor Need to Know, and Insights for Sales Game Changers, Lessons from the Most Important Sales Leaders on the Planet, are now available on Amazon. Fred, it's so great to have you on the show.
It's good to see you, Stephan. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, you bet. I was really excited to have you on to talk about Lyme disease, which is something I don't know a lot about. And I know that you have personal experience in your family with it. And I'd love for us to start by the origin story of how you deep dived into that topic area and came up with an entire book on the topic. Yeah, you have a powerful story about that.
Yeah, it's an epidemic, the Lyme disease. Lyme is a tick-borne illness. So basically it's transferred from mammals, typically deer, maybe mice, through a tick onto a human being. A tick is so minuscule, I can't even really describe how small it is. Most people who get Lyme disease don't even realize that they were bitten by a tick. Luckily, if you see what's called a bullseye rash a day or two after getting bit, then you'll see there's basically two stages of the Lyme disease. There's, if you notice you were bitten by a tick, or if you feel fatigued or you have certain symptoms, if you get treated relatively quickly within a couple of weeks, typically with antibiotics, the Lyme should go away. You may have complications, but in most cases, the antibiotics will take care of the Lyme. There's millions of people, however, are in what's called the chronic stage, where they were bitten years ago, decades sometimes, maybe 20, 30 years ago. They didn't know what they had. Doctors couldn't diagnose it. They misdiagnosed it as chronic fatigue syndrome or fibromyalgia or a mental, maybe it's in your head type of a thing. And when you get to the chronic stage, it's very, very difficult to cure, let alone treat. Someone in my life had chronic Lyme disease, still does, and I decided I really needed to understand more about what this particular person was going through. So I bought last summer of 2021, I bought every book on Lyme disease, joined a bunch of Facebook groups. There's like 1,000, Stephan, like 1,000 Facebook groups. Some of them have 30, 40, 50,000 people who participate. Some of them have, hundreds. Maybe the Utah Lyme Disease Association Facebook group, maybe has 1,000 people. A lot of times when people find a cure or something that gives them peace in their treatment, they'll create their own, Facebook page as well. So I just started jumping on these pages, reading these books, listening to some webinars, and I realized a couple of things. It's a nefarious disease. It's impossible almost to cure when it gets to the chronic stage. It's possible to treat, but to cure, it's very difficult. Lyme is basically a bacteria that gets into almost every organ in your body, and it looks like what it's not. So for example, if it gets into your joints, it looks like you have arthritis. So a lot of doctors, without knowing, will say, oh, you have arthritis. Here's our protocol for arthritis. Well, you don't have arthritis, you have Lyme disease. Or maybe there's some neurological issues, brain fog, things along those lines. And they'll say, well, here's how we treat those types of things. Or it might be carditis, maybe it inflames the brain. Basically, the bacteria inflames parts of your body. So I realized one thing also when I started looking at these Facebook groups. One of the common things that people were saying was, nobody believes me. My spouse left me. He or she doesn't believe that I have this disease. They're gone. My family doesn't believe me. My friends don't believe me. So last summer, I wrote an article for LymeDisease.org called How to Be a More Supportive Partner or how to be more supportive when your partner has chronic Lyme disease. Got like 1,000 downloads. People started reaching out to me. All of a sudden, I had like hundreds of new Facebook friends. I started to do a little more research into it. And I realized there was never a book written to help family members and friends and spouses, for that matter, understand what their loved one was going through. So it led to Love, Hope, Lyme, what family members, partners, and friends who love a chronic Lyme survivor need to know. And we published the book in August of 2022.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, congratulations. You're revealing light in the world, and that's a wonderful thing. Now, what has come about because of that book? So it just came out pretty recently. And I'm sure you've gotten some emails and voice memos and things like that from readers. What jumps out at you as a nice impact from your book?
Well, so many things. So I have like 1,500 new Facebook friends, and a little bit slow to Instagram, but been ramping up our Instagram presence as well. Here's the thing: a lot of people know somebody. People are reaching out to me all the time. Hey, I saw your. So I'm a frequent poster on Facebook. I take excerpts from the book. I'm also very active on LinkedIn. Yes, I do a lot of stuff on sales as it relates to my day job running the Institute for Excellence in Sales, but I also frequently do posts on Lyme disease awareness. And I've had hundreds of people reach out and say, didn't even know this existed. But a lot of things, Stephan, I'll get somebody who reaches out and says, I want you to meet my friend Sue Smith. And a lot of people reach out to me for job help. They're looking for a new job as a sales professional. And I know a lot of companies and how they're organized. But more and more, I was getting people reaching out and saying, I want to introduce you to Sue Smith. And Sue Smith and I will connect, and she'll say she's had Lyme disease, for 20 years. Or someone will say my sister-in-law's niece has Lyme disease, right? And they'll buy the book to understand what they're going through. One of my best clients of all time reached out and said that his niece has had Lyme disease for 3 years and she's been battling it. Most people have like a very periphery understanding. It's like, oh, I think it's a tick-borne illness, right? Yeah, it's definitely transmitted by ticks, usually. Might be another insect. They'll say something like, it's like when you have fatigue. Isn't that mainly it? Yeah, that's fatigue and stress and anxiety and pain and neurologic issues. A lot of times people with chronic Lyme disease, they can't work. They're bedridden. I've met so many people, Stephan, who've been bedridden for months, if not years. They can't work. The anxiety is too much. And the other thing is, you break an ankle, every orthopedic surgeon on the planet is going to say, we're going to put you in a cast for 6 weeks. You're going to sit on your butt for 2 weeks, watch Lost reruns, and then you're going to be fine, slowly recover. With Lyme, there's so many ways in your body and your life history, past traumas are important to address to be able to recover from Lyme. So it's unbelievable that this disease exists on the planet.
How do you diagnose this? If you're dealing with some of the symptoms, you've never gotten to the bottom of it. How do you end up getting that Lyme diagnosis?
So there's a couple of tests, and the problem is there's 3 major tests. 2 of them only detect it if it's 50% positive. And there's another test, the IGeneX test, that's much higher, but it's not it's not like a pregnancy test or a COVID test where you just, swab your tongue or underneath your tongue and you see that you definitely have something like that. A lot of it is evidential. So there's a famous questionnaire put out by Dr. Richard Horowitz, who's probably the preeminent, what they call Lyme literate medical doctor on the planet. He created a questionnaire. It takes you about 10 minutes to fill out. It rules out things. So a lot of it is evidentiary. It's like, do you have this? Do you remember getting bitten by the tick? Have you had these symptoms? Like I said, a lot of times it looks like arthritis. So people are treated for arthritis, but it's not. A lot of times the treatment will not work for what it is. One of the big challenges is, you try treating it with so many things, but they're not going to work. So you try this and it doesn't work, and you try this and it doesn't work, and you try this and it works for a day, but then the symptoms come back the next day. It's a very anxiety-ridden disease as well. It's something I learned during the research.
So is the anxiety something that is a direct symptom, or is it kind of indirect because you can't figure out why you're having all these other symptoms?
I think it's both. I think you could start, maybe you're an anxious person because of your makeup or whatever it might be. And then, going through the treatment that doesn't work doesn't help with your anxiety. But what I've come to learn is it's the latter, as you just pointed out, which is, let's say you finally see a doctor and he tells you to do this. And here's another little twist. Lyme, especially at the chronic stage, is not covered by insurance. So whenever you go to see a Lyme doctor, with the exception of the first 30 days of antibiotics, the insurance is probably not going to cover the Lyme disease. And one of the major reasons is insurance companies don't want to pay for something that's never going to be cured. You keep trying things. One of the reasons why these Facebook groups popped up, I was not familiar with the concept of crowd curing, right? So people were struggling with, why is this not working? Or my doctor told me to do this. And then you're not going to see your doctor for 30, 60 days. So you constantly have new symptoms that appear. you try something, but then you lose energy, and then you try something else and you have a burning sensation, right? So all these people were going to Facebook and at the old, and maybe listservs originally, and they were typing in, my feet are burning. And then people will reply, well, that's because you're detoxing, or that's because of this. So you should do this. And people will say, well, and one of the key things you need to do when you have a disease like this is you need to detox the bacteria. Getting rid of the bacteria is hard. And then there's this whole other process, which is known as a Herxheimer effect, which is the burning, getting rid of the bacteria, which he just killed, is even harder, right? So it's like a double whammy type of a thing. It truly is a nefarious disease. And, it's not just, hey, you go to CVS and there's, anti-Lyme put out by Pfizer. There's no pills for Lyme. There's a balance between Western medicine and herbals. So there's a whole world of herbals that you can take, supplements you can take to get rid of some of the symptoms. You're not going to get rid of the Lyme, but you might get rid of the burning. You might get rid of some of the brain fog, etc.
I haven't seen this show, but I'm curious if you have. It's on Netflix, and it's called Diagnosis. It's all about these difficult to diagnose diseases, rare issues that they covered, and had these different episodes focused on different rare diseases and the journey of trying to figure out what the heck the person had. Curious if you saw that show.
No, I haven't seen the show, and actually, ironically, I just started watching Netflix this weekend. Dead to Me. I've always wanted to see. I'm not a huge TV watcher, but one of the other things too is there's a couple of celebrities who have come out. Tommy Hilfiger's daughter, Allie Hilfiger, wrote a book on her journey with Lyme. There's a woman called Yolanda Hadid, she was a star on some of the Housewives of Beverly Hills series, and she wrote a book on her journey with Lyme disease. All these people in the Lyme community, they're looking for celebrities. Avril Lavigne, the singer, has come out. Shania Twain recently announced that she had kind of early stage Lyme back in the early 2000s. Elena Delle Donne, the MVP of the WNBA for the Washington Mystics, she just announced a brand new shoe that has lime green as kind of the color for Lyme. And she just Nike or whoever is her sponsor just created this brand new shoe for her. It's just it's an insidious disease. I mean, people were looking for just ideas to make it through the day, right? And one of the other things is a lot of times stress will cause the disease to flare. Has anyone dealt with any stress over the last 2.5 years? Stephan, of course, the whole world has dealt with stress. So it's popped up in many, many places where people all of a sudden have found, because of the stress of lockdown, of financial struggles, of maybe losing someone in their family, wondering, is COVID worse than getting vaccinated? Was a big topic, so you couldn't even use the word vaccinated on certain Facebook pages because Facebook would come and take down the page. So you had to be very careful. It's insane. And thus the last thing is, like I mentioned before about the breaking your ankle, everyone's going to see you in a cast, right? Everyone's going to understand what you're going through. You can't see somebody with Lyme. It shows up as fatigue. So a lot of people will say it. A lot of people have reached out to me and said, I want to buy your book because nobody believes me. They say that you look fine. Okay, well, okay, thank you. I'm not, I don't have Lyme, but the person with the Lyme disease. Last thing too is that there's also political issues. The CDC does not recognize chronic Lyme disease. They say that you should be treated with 30 days of antibiotics. And if you have symptoms after the 30 days, they call it post-treatment Lyme disease syndrome. So if you Google CDC chronic Lyme, it's going to say chronic Lyme disease doesn't exist. And there's a whole world of doctors that will say, well, chronic Lyme doesn't exist. And imagine if your wife or your sister or your niece or your daughter has this disease and you see her not being able to work and anxious. You want to love her and have her treated, but then you go to the internet and you type in chronic Lyme, and the first thing you see is the CDC says it doesn't exist. Sweetheart, I don't think this disease exists because it says here on the internet that it doesn't exist. Well, Dad, I couldn't get out of bed for the last 2 years. My brain doesn't work the same way yours does. It's quite an insidious thing that nature has thrown upon us.
It's like the establishment is gaslighting all of the Lyme sufferers.
Gaslighting is, I think it's Merriam-Webster said it's the number one word of 2022, and not infrequently we'll see that.
So how does somebody who is caring for a chronic Lyme sufferer assist their loved one, other than just believing them and trying to make them more comfortable, be helping them to apply for disability or something like that? What else is there to do?
That's a great question. And I went through this obviously deep in depth in the book. So it was more like an education. So for example, gluten, people who have Lyme disease typically will eat a gluten-free diet. One of the reasons is gluten is an inhibitor to blocking the destruction of the bacteria. Your whole purpose when you have Lyme disease is to get rid of the Lyme bacteria that's in your body. Gluten inhibits that. Mold inhibits that. So you need to know that a lot of people who suffer from Lyme, the moldy situations are sometimes even worse. So you need to ensure that your person is in a place where there's no mold, that it's a serious, real thing. Second thing is, it's not, take a pill and it's gone, right? And it's not, you've been sleeping in bed for the last 2 days. Let's get up and let's go for a walk. Well, I've heard from people with Lyme disease that the fatigue, it's not just like, hey, I'm tired. I'm going to go to bed early tonight, right? I'm not going to go to bed at 8:00. It's fatigue that you can't even imagine. It's such overwhelming fatigue, people have told me. So you need to be sensitive to all of these possible things that this person could be dealing with. You also need to understand the struggles with treating this disease. Like I mentioned before, insurance doesn't cover it. A lot of people with Lyme can't work, so it's like a double-edged sword. The thing I say at the end of the book is, you love this person, right? You chose to be with this person, or this person is part of your family. Just because this person was bitten by a tick 6 months ago, 2 years, 10 years, 20 years ago, wasn't her or his fault, right? No one chose to get Lyme disease. You really don't put yourself in position to get Lyme disease. Unlike lung cancer, well, you've been smoking for 30 years, right? Or diabetes, if all you do is go to McDonald's and drink big gulps all day long, right? You're going to be obese and you're going to have certain diseases related to that. Heart disease, because you eat improperly. You could be the best eater on the planet. You could be just, in great shape, but you get bitten by a tick one day. And it doesn't even have to be like going into the forest. It could be people in New York City have gotten Lyme disease. There's ticks all over the place. Wherever there are deer, the average deer has 3,000 to 5,000 ticks on, and I've read ticks are killing the moose in Maine. I read a stat that said 90% of so Lyme also happens to animals. 90% of the moose in Maine are getting destroyed because of ticks, and a lot of it ties back to climate change and all these kinds of things too. You just understand the things that may make this person struggle. Be sensitive to why they're anxious, and know that it's a lot of times because of the disease. And, just try to be helpful. One thing I say in my book is he or she doesn't want to be a puppy dog, right? They don't want to be spoon fed. It's not like a child who has the flu or something, your 3-year-old that you have to really baby, but they want to be understood. They want to be treated with respect.
Are there supplements that are quite helpful, or other kinds of modalities that stuck out to you as like, wow, this is a non-traditional alternative therapy or something, and more people need to know about this who are suffering with Lyme?
Yeah. So there's typically 2 ways to treat. One is antibiotics. And there are even some people who prescribe antibiotics 3, 4, 5, 10 years. I see these questions every day on the Facebook groups. Should I start doing antibiotics again? Well, there's a lot of problems with antibiotics. It can destroy your gut. It can destroy the lining of your stomach. But that is the Western medicine solution to Lyme disease, is taking doxycycline or doxycycline. I forget what it's doxy. I usually refer to it as. But then there's this whole world of Eastern medicine, herbals. There's so many of them. There was a guy named Dr. Stephan who was one of the leaders in trying to figure out, can these supplements take care of some of the symptoms that are distributed by Lyme disease? Most Lyme literate doctors will treat with the balance of the Western medicine, which is typically antibiotics, maybe some other things, and Eastern medicine. One thing I do, as I'm talking about this, state very clearly in my book is that when people ask me, I got 2, 3 people a week who ask me for medical advice. And I say, hey, I have a history major from Emory University, and I have an MBA from San Jose State. You don't want me to tell you what you should do. Go see what I call what the world calls a Lyme literate doctor, Lyme literate medical doctor, LLMD. I didn't even know that term even existed prior to my starting this research about a year ago. They all are trained to give you a treatment. I've become good friends with one of the top Lyme literate medical doctors in the country, and I asked him, "How do you treat?" And he says it's a mix. We do a mix between Western and Eastern. A lot of it also is mindset, and that's tough. It's really hard to tell somebody who's in constant fatigue and constantly stressed about the pain that they wake up with every day that you need to have a mindset of moving forward. But when I did my research for the book, there were 3 types of books. There were books that were like an inch and a half thick. How do I get better? How can I get better? Typically written by doctors. And those were encyclopedic descriptions of the history of the Lyme, all these various aspects. Sleep. I see this all the time. Getting the right amount of sleep is something that's critical. Second type of book I would find is, what I call my battle with the tick. Like I mentioned before, Ali Hilfiger's book or Yolanda Hadid's book, and there's probably 20, 30 books out there, I guess. People who have overcome the devastation of the chronic Lyme and how they have gotten themselves into a place of peace and control. And then there were this third category, mindfulness and Lyme, keto diet and Lyme, herbals and Lyme. So there's plenty of research out there on which herbals you could be taking to take care of various symptoms that you need to do. I've met some people, Stephan, who've traveled all over the world, who've gone to Germany, who've gone to Peru, who've gone to India in seek of cures. Any medical issue I've ever had in my life, it's either handled by the CVS across the street or by going to the gym and sitting in the sauna or the steam room for a little bit. Imagine having to go to India on the shot that you may find something that's going to put you into peace. It's literally insane.
I'm curious about the role of acupuncture.
Acupuncture, chiropractic, various types of modalities like that are frequently used. Yoga, a lot of doctors prescribe yoga. The point being to stretch out the various places in your body. One of the things that they talk about, I talk about this in my book, 6 stages of healing. It was submitted in my book by a guy named Greg Kirk, who wrote a book called The Gratitude Curve. And this is something I never realized. Top doctors say you need to deal with childhood trauma in your life before your body is going to be able to cure itself from the physical challenges that Lyme provides. And I mentioned him before, Dr. Horowitz. I was on a webinar that he gave, and he said, if you don't deal with your childhood trauma, there's no way that your body is going to be able to cure itself from this disease. So there's so many other things. Sometimes you need to leave your situation. You may be married to somebody and have kids, but the stress just gets overwhelming. So you need to leave. You need to go away in the hopes of figuring out how to cure yourself from the disease.
I can't even imagine. One modality that I want to talk to you about and see what your thoughts are. My wife, Orion, has a podcast as well, Stellar Life, and she had a guest on who's the co-founder of Lila Quantum Tech. Her name is Crew von Holzendorf-Felling. She had Lyme disease. She had it for, I think, 13 years. And this device that she and her husband created is a quantum box, quantum energy. It's called a quantum block, BLOC. It's been really quite powerful for me and my wife to have 2 of them. I actually have the higher end model that has 7 times more quantum energy than the quantum block. It's called the Infinity Block. It sounds fantastical, maybe nonsensical for some of the listeners, but it actually is quite profound, and I've gotten a lot of value from it. I invite people who come and visit to put something in the quantum block or in the infinity block and let's say a piece of jewelry, and then after a couple minutes take it out and then wear it and see if you feel anything. And most people who do that feel something. It's really cool. Anyway, so she had an impressive recovery from Lyme disease. Just one of the things that strikes me about people who I know who went through this horrible ordeal, the struggle, and a lot of pain is that they've come out the other side with some sort of epiphany or some sort of invention or modality that's been life-changing. Another person who comes to mind who is also a guest on Orion's podcast, is Kristen Van Way. She had Lyme disease for, well, it's decades. So she found that essential oils made a profound impact for her. So she's feeling 100% better now. I'm not going to say that this is a cure or anything because, of course, we're not allowed to say that, right? All disclaimers apply. This is not medical advice, etc. But what she describes as the impact of these different essential oils that she's tried has changed her life. And so I'm curious to hear any stories that really jump out at you of people who have had impressive recoveries and the modality that they came up with that is non-traditional and something that you might not have even heard of before.
There's two that come to mind. There's a device known as a Rife machine. Basically what it does is it shoots radio frequencies into your body. I have met people who say the Rife machine, it doesn't cure the Lyme, but it keeps your body at a stable level, if you will. And I've met some people who swear by it, who say they've tried everything. Then they tried this Rife machine and it's brought them such peace. Now it doesn't kill. I don't think it kills the bacteria, but basically it's something that puts people at peace. Rife machine, R-I-F-E.
Yeah.
And you'll see people on these Facebook groups, they'll say, what's a Rife machine that you recommend? And a whole bunch of them out there, if you will. And I remember I was interviewing somebody who had recovered, quote unquote, from Lyme. And I said, have you ever tried a Rife machine? And then he transferred his camera on his laptop and there it was, like 5 feet away. So that's something. And there's a lot of discussion over the last couple of years about ivermectin. There's been debates, typically ivermectin is used to kill parasites in horses. Basically what happens, one of the side effects of Lyme, this goes back to, you asked before, what should people know? When a tick bites you, just doesn't give you Lyme disease. Now, not every tick will give you Lyme disease, but let's say this particular tick does give you Lyme disease and your body is susceptible to it. The tick also transmutes a couple dozen other things known as co-infections. It's not just the Lyme. There's Bartonella, there's Babesia, Rocky Mountain spotted fever. These are all gifts that are given to you by the tick as well. So you may have to treat the Bartonella first, and then you got to treat the Babesia, and then you treat the Lyme. And I'll see people saying, I'm still working on treating Bartonella. I'm still working on treating Babesia, and then I'm going to start treating some of the things with Lyme. I just thought there was Lyme disease. I didn't even know this thing called co-infection. It's called, when you're battling that, it's the term I've never heard of before, which is comorbidity. You have one or two multiple diseases inside your body that your body's trying to attack. There's a very popular Telegram show where the guy, I'm not going to give him a plug here, but you could find it, where he talks about using ivermectin as the cure for Lyme. And you may recall, during the whole COVID, situation, people were talking, is that going to be a cure for COVID? Well, there's a lot of people in the Lyme world who are using Ivy, and I see people back and forth. What's the best way to get it? Where do you get it? How do you get it? And I write this in my book. One of the first things I say is, imagine having this disease where you have to use treatment that is usually used to get rid of parasites in horses, and then also having to use a machine that's constantly shooting radio frequencies into your body. That's the depth that you have to go to, to be able to cure this over years, right? You have to travel to Mexico or to a clinic in Germany to treat this disease. So people are searching for any type of solution. There's no vaccine for Lyme disease. There was one that was attempted in the early 2000s that was canceled. There's some discussion that Pfizer may be working on a vaccine for Lyme right now. There hasn't been a whole lot of information coming out about that. Now, one of the good things is, real briefly, people, since it's epidemic level, there are places like Johns Hopkins and Tufts that are really working hard to try to figure out ways, because it's just a devastating disease that truly destroys lives.
How about hyperbaric oxygen? Is that something that can assist with the symptoms or with folks feeling better who are suffering from Lyme?
Yeah, I'll see that. I'll see some people saying that is the thing that saved them. Infrared sauna as well. One of the frequent suggestions is you need to be sweating out, because remember, once again, Lyme is a bacteria and it produces all these toxins in your body. So one of the goals is to get the bacteria out of the body. And then, like I mentioned before, once you kill the bacteria, you then got to get the remnants out, right? Which causes that Herxheimer effect I had mentioned before. So people are looking for anything. I'll see people posting things all day long. Has anyone tried this? Has anyone tried this? Has anyone tried this? And then a lot of people come back and say, it comes back to removing stress. It comes back to your diet. It comes back to being out of a moldy place. Some people say that the mold is worse than the Lyme. The thing you had just suggested, there's things popping up all over the place. Here's the reality though, Stephan. There's no silver bullet. There's no pill. If you are gifted with chronic Lyme disease, one of the critical stages in healing is accepting that you have chronic Lyme disease. And then you can have an amazing life. There are people who I do a podcast like you called the Sales Game Changers podcast, where I interview sales leaders from around the globe. And I've done close to 600 shows. We also wrote another book that came out the same day as Love, Hope, Lyme called Insights for Sales Game Changers, where we talk about that. And 1 out of every 6 or 7 shows I devote to the convergence of chronic illness and sales success. And I've met people who are very successful in sales. People are reaching out to me, hey, you should interview my friend. She's the VP of sales at whatever. And then when I interview these people, they deal with all the stuff that we've mentioned before, but they've not allowed it to control every aspect of their life. One woman I met who's a VP of business development for a very large services company, I said, most people can't get out of bed. How are you able to be a VP of business development at a known, if I mentioned the company, you would definitely know the name of the company. And she said, I work till 5 o'clock. I stop at 5 o'clock and I don't work on weekends. And weekends, I work on my recovery, my rest, all those types of things, quiet time with family, whatever it might be. I've heard people who said, actually last week, because of Thanksgiving, we're doing today's interview at the end of November in 2022. People have said, I overdid it. I had, half a bottle of wine and it took me 3 days to recover. Alcohol and certain foods and certain activities will definitely put you in a place that you need to recover from.
3 pieces of pumpkin pie, probably not good either.
Well, first of all, there's the gluten. Second of all, people say you need to be totally off of sugar. So, what do? Do you do Splenda? There's so many, then I'll see this too. I'll see posts, the 5 foods you should definitely stay away from if you have chronic Lyme disease. And cheese, because of the mold. It's just insane how you have to be conscious of how you live your life.
Well, I've heard peanuts and peanut butter typically full of mold.
Mold's a big problem.
Yeah.
I've seen people who are insane stuff. I've seen people who live in their car. It's like I've slept in my car the last 3 nights because the apartment I just moved into, I saw mold.
Now, you mentioned the word gifted a little bit ago. Somebody who's gifted with this disease. What do you mean by that? Because it could be seen as or interpreted as a flippant remark, but I think has a spiritual meaning to. I have a feeling that was what you were meaning by it, but I'd love to hear more about that.
So I've added close to 2,000 Facebook friends over the last 2 months since my book came out. And when you add 15, and most of them are from the Lyme world, of course. These people who run Lyme groups, when I told them about the book, they said, oh, please join our group. And I said, well, I don't have Lyme. I kind of feel like I'm a voyeur. They said, no. You wrote something that's going to help so many people. You're part of our community for whatever led you to write this. So I added like close to 2,000 Facebook friends. As you can imagine, when you add 2,000 people to your world, there's the whole spectrum, right? There's some people who are way to the right on certain issues. There's some people who are way to the left on certain issues. And I said to myself, you know what, if they're going to read my book and if they're going to repost it, I don't really care if you're to the right of me or to the left of me. If you're endorsing Kanye West, for example, goodbye, you're going to be gone. But anybody else who's just a human being who's trying to figure out how to make it through day by day, I've seen people who are devoutly religious. And I've seen people who, and a certain religious figure from 2,000 years ago is going to save me. And I'm devoting all my energy to this particular being to save me from this disease. And then I see people on the other side who are like, there ain't no God. Why would God treat his children this way with giving them this life of pain and suffering? So the people that I've seen embark upon quality life, whatever that may look like for them, have gotten to the point where they've accepted the fact that they have chronic Lyme disease. It's not easy. It's not easy saying, gee, I'm not going to be the CEO of IBM because of this disease, or I'm not going to be able to party like I did before I was bitten, right? And I'm not going to want to go to social events because I'm going to feel fatigued and I'm going to have the anxiety in my brain. But The people that I've seen who are living healthy lives, not, I use the word gifted as I was searching for a word as I brought that up, but the people that are living quality lives, for whatever the lack of the term might be, have accepted the fact that for whatever reason, and I believe nothing happens for a reason. It's another podcast we could do. My whole view on spirituality has shifted since I decided to truly understand this disease and how it affected not just somebody I loved, but millions of people. You have to get to that point. And then a lot of people have said, you know what? I've met great people. I don't have Lyme disease. I've met so many amazing people over the last year. Prior to my starting this research, I knew one person who I love dearly. Now I have hundreds of friends. These people rely on each other. I'll see people saying things like, I'm thankful, like on Thanksgiving last week, I'm so thankful for this community, for being here for me when nobody else is. Were you meant to meet all these amazing people? Were you meant to educate the world because of this disease? It's probably something to think about when you were 3. You know, when your teacher said, you know, gee, Tommy, what do you want to be when you get older? No one's going to say, I want to be a Lyme survivor. This happened. Again, I don't believe it happened for a reason. I believe it happened because you were bitten by a tick. So how now do you want to live your life? You could live it miserably. You could be angry all the time. That's your choice. Or you could accept that you have it and then live the best possible life that you can. I tell you, man, I've reevaluated my view on spirituality. We could talk for another 5 hours about that. I prefer not to at this time, but that's basically it. It's getting to the point of acceptance and then living the rest of your life, you know, not up in your bed, you know, because you're bedridden, but living it with who you want to live with, living it where you want to live, doing the things that you're capable of, understanding your limits, and then living the best possible life. And like I said in my book, you know, the last line I said is, have hope, be loved with proper medical treatment. So it's still a disease. You still got to figure out how to get rid of it and to manage it.
I just thought of another past guest who had Lyme disease for probably decades. I think she got it in her childhood, and it was diagnosed maybe 10, 15 years ago. She dealt with it. I'm not going to say the word cure because we've already said vaccine multiple times and ivermectin, and this is this episode's going to get so buried by the algorithms. But anyways, her name is Katie Beecher. She wrote the book Heal from Within. I don't know what your reception is going to be, but I have a feeling it's not going to be that keen on it based on what you just said. But she's a medical intuitive and psychic. I've experienced her gift. My wife has experienced her gift, had her on her podcast as well, and she's been on this podcast. She's the real deal from my perspective. And of course, all disclaimers apply, et cetera, et cetera. Her gift of getting Lyme disease led her to this spiritual discovery and awakening, and she's changed a lot of people's lives, and she considers it a gift that she had Lyme disease for such a long period of time that it led her to work on healing herself and then unlock her healing gifts to heal others. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I'm Facebook friends with her. I've actually downloaded her book. I haven't read it yet. Listen, as you're saying that, this is a community that is searching for answers. You know, this is a community. I see people jump up on these Facebook groups, and some of the questions are, you know, very provocative and thoughtful. Hey, this is the symptoms that I have. I've tried this. Does anyone have any recommendations? And then people chime in with blah, 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 whatever the recommendations might be. And then I see people who are quite desperate. It's like, I did this. I'm at my wit's end. One of the moments that changed my life was I decided to write this book because people reached out after I did that original blog post on LymeDisease.org. And I said, this book isn't out there and people don't understand what they're going through. And every day I would see 1 or 2 posts, Stephan, where people would say, I'm not going to July 4th with my family because no one believes me. And I would see that all the time. You know what the other post I would see? I saw a post in June of 2022. It was posted by a woman. Her Facebook name was Chell's Peace. And she wrote very clearly, can't take this anymore. Could someone please PM me on the best way to take my own life? It was very succinct. And then you would see there was 20, 30 comments. Please don't, you know, we're here for you. You shouldn't, don't, blah, blah, blah. Basically, people were trying to support her as best they could online. And I made a screenshot of that. And whenever I was questioning, should I finish this book? You know, is it the right thing to do? I would always look at that JPEG and I would say, yeah, and people say the number one cause of death with Lyme is suicide. So I decided to keep moving forward. Someone posted a month and a half ago, hey, does anybody remember that post? I want to let you know that she did take her life. She left 2 small children. Her husband reached out to me. Everybody, I guess, has suicidal thoughts. I don't know. But to actually do it because of a disease like this. So to answer your question, you know what? Whatever you find, whatever is going to keep you going for another day, another month, another year, rest of your life, however long that is. I hope it's not hatred. I hope it's not, terrorism. Usually it's not going to be something like that. But if it's a deeper faith in whatever your religion might be, if it's a deeper faith in Eastern religion, if it's doing something you've never done before, good for you. It's find whatever is going to keep you moving forward.
It's a difficult situation. Hats off to you for sticking through the struggle of writing that book. I know it pales in comparison to actually suffering from the disease, but it is an important thing that you've done to help people ameliorate suffering of loved ones. And that's a beautiful thing.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I've gotten so many people. Actually, I see 2 notifications right here. People are reaching out. I've made the ebook free for Lyme survivors. The book is available on Amazon, and we're on the process of getting it up everywhere else it typically needs to be. But I decided, you know what, it's the e-version. The PDF is free for Lyme survivors. They can just reach out to me either via LinkedIn or Facebook is the easiest way to find me. If it's going to help some people get some peace, if it's going to help family members understand how to support their loved ones, then hopefully it's going to continue to make a difference.
Thank you so much for sharing from your heart today what has been going on for you and what you found to be some of the most important data points and recommendations from all your research. I think it's going to help some more people. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you. And I appreciate you. Your show is great. I was very flattered to have connected with you, the Get Yourself Optimized podcast. You've interviewed some amazing people. You've done some great things in your life. It was nice to find out our tie with the Carter Library, the Carter Center, I guess it's called. I know you did a lot of work with former President Carter. I spent a lot of quality time with him when he was building the library. I cherish those moments. So good job to you for the great work that you do and you continue to do.
All right. Well, listener, I hope you get out there and make a difference in the world. And if somebody is even tangentially related or connected to you who's suffering from Lyme disease, I hope that you pass this episode on to them and also recommend Fred's book. Thank you, and we'll catch you on the next episode. I'm your host, Stephan Spencer, signing off.